Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. And if you're just joining us, we're talking about a story right now, concerns with homeowners associations that might be dealing with the graying of the baby boomer generation. People staying in their home in place longer, and in the next 13 years, they said, 70% of the baby boomers, I think,
will grow by 70%.
Grow by 70%.
Of 65 and over will grow by 70% in the next 13 years. So communities
and 3 out of 5 do.
And 3.
Well,
right.
just throw
and
numbers
it's
out there.
impacting communities because a greater percentage of their membership each year will be elderly.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there are some concerns. We talked about the person who might not be able to take care of themselves quite as well. And so the home isn't being kept up.
Yeah, but the hoarding you mentioned. I think another very common issue is when management or people on the board get concerned about someone's welfare because they haven't seen the person. A neighbor will say, I haven't seen my elderly neighbor for days, and she's usually outside every morning watering the roses. What does the association do in that case?
Yeah. We had a situation. It was terrible. One of our assistant managers, they were a resident manager a few years ago at a condo association that we manage, and they always talked to this one gentleman every day. He was always just great to chat with. He always looked forward to his visits for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't see the guy for 2 or 3 days.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
And someone said, we haven't seen so-and-so. And that was so unlike him because everybody said he was so nice to everybody.
Right.
He was always saying hi. Everybody always expected him. They didn't. They finally went in, and they found him that he had passed away.
Yeah, and unfortunately that happens. I think everyone who's been in property management for very long has had that situation. So what does the board do? Does that mean, do they just barge in and do welfare checks on people whenever they are concerned?
Well, I don't think that would be necessarily wise.
No.
But this gentleman who is an attorney again for Megan McDonald and Scanlon, his name is LeClaire Ryan. He suggests a couple of things, very good ideas. Number one, he said, first, take a careful look at all the statutes, ordinances, and the association's governing documents.
Yeah, that's always a good first step.
You always do it. You always check because the documents are going to give you an idea of what authority you have as an association.
That's right.
And steps that you can take.
That's right. And the legalities are important because even if you have some authority as a homeowners association, what's legal and what's not legal?
Yes. For example, the governing documents may state that the association has the right to enter in case of an emergency.
Sure.
Well, you should really determine what those emergencies are.
Yeah.
For example, no water, no electricity, or too much water everywhere.
Damage to an adjacent unit.
Yeah, those are things that are fire. Those are things that are emergencies where things need to be dealt with. But because you haven't seen someone for a couple of days, that may not necessarily be the case. They're giving you the authority to go in.
So this attorney is advising that boards are clear about their proper role and their responsibilities under the law.
And when a person is doing that, Tony, I think the key there, don't you agree, would be you're looking at the governing documents for the purpose of trying to understand what is the role of the board in the association, and it's generally going to be for the preservation and the safety of people and the building. And that pretty much, I think, sums it up.
It does. Yep, I think so.
Another thing he talks about, he said, is the association should take a closer look at the existing and future needs of their older residents with a view towards connecting them with helpful resources.
I think that's a great idea. And as a management company, we should probably start looking at this more extensively as well. Yeah. What are the services available for the elderly in my county? What are their phone numbers? Who can I refer?
What kinds of things come to mind that you think could
Well,
be provided? Or
we've dealt with hoarders in rental property as well as community associations. And I know I struggled for quite a while trying to figure out how to help and how to protect that person and their neighbors from potential damage. And we finally had a speaker at MHA and one of the Lunch and Learns that talked about adult services. Every county in the state of Minnesota has an adult services department, and you can call them, you can tell them of your concern, and they're required to go visit that person. You have no control over what happens, after you've made the call, but at least you've taken a step that someone will check in on them, and they have the legal authority to do that.
yes, you're right, and they take a look at. We dealt with that last week, I think.
Did you?
In a story too? Remember when we were talking about people, a government agency that wanted to look into an association with someone that had severe hoarding, and they had to be careful. They couldn't just force their way in. They have to try and make contact, and that's exactly, I guess, the case. They try to first make contact with the individual, try to see if they can just chat with them a little bit to see if they're okay. Really there and present.
The other step we would take is if we were concerned about someone's welfare, for example, that person who didn't show up for a few days, you can call the police as well. And although they won't break into a unit either, you can at least make a report. This is a good reason to have emergency contact information in your database. Who's your closest relative? Who do we call in the event of an emergency? Because then you can call a relative and say, we haven't seen Joe for a couple of days. Will you please check on him?
And that is, it seems like a small thing, but folks, if you live in a homeowners association, please, please, please give contact information to the association. They're not going to be using it to sell to advertisers and to other people that are going to bother you. But this very thing that we're talking about, if there's someone who is elderly, who is the next of kin? Is there someone else that can be contacted? We had someone who was fine. They weren't elderly, Tony, but they were out of the country for 2 months on business. And we saw one January. I was on call with Leonard, and we ended up 2 a.m. going out to a property where the siding was peeled away and water was shooting out 20 feet and creating what was a waterfall, but was beginning to freeze over.
Oh my gosh!
Out of a burst pipe.
Pipes froze, right?
And you want to be able to, there's things that need to be dealt with.
Any multifamily housing, if you live in multifamily housing, whether it's rental or a CIC, make sure your management has your best contact information.
Yeah. Now, here's something else they also talk about in this article, and I think this is a great idea. How about in larger communities, some are moving towards establishing, for example, a weekly shuttle to the grocery store.
I think that's a great idea, that communities are trying to anticipate some of the needs of their population as it ages. Yep. And I think that's a fabulous idea.
Yeah, trying to promote socialization with lunches and events.
There you go. Well, and you'd meet people on the bus to the grocery store, too.
Yeah. Now, here was an interesting one. Here's some, I've not heard of this before. They talked about granny pods.
Oh, yeah, that interested me as well.
It says it's a miniature mobile home-like structure, custom designed for the elderly and intended to be parked in the backyard of a relative's home. Is becoming more popular. I've never heard of this before.
I haven't either, but and my reaction was, I think that's a warm weather solution. I think for some reason I don't think it's that practical in a state where you have to heat for 9 months. I'm not
you can't
sure
put
about that.
Granny when it's 24 below zero.
Can't put her out in the garage. You really shouldn't. But they say forward-thinking associations should think about whether they're going to allow something like that.
And again, this is in a situation probably where we're talking about probably most likely single-family homes, detached, where people actually have a yard and it's their yard, versus a condo
Common
association.
Areas,
A lot of condos don't even have rooms for probably even 2 or 3 granny pods. Put side to side.
You'd end up with a granny ghetto. Wouldn't you?
And that's even a whole nother problem
that's
there.
Another story altogether.
Yes. Well, some interesting ideas,
Yeah.
things to take a look at
Yeah.
with the grain of America here, especially as it pertains to homeowner associations. We're going to take one last break here. When we come back, we've got the story on the HOA Twilight Zone. This is something you don't want to miss, so stay tuned. We'll be back after these messages.